Hi, welcome to Farmer's Daughter. I'm Evelyn Golden. I'm the farmer's daughter. I'm not a horticulturist, nor am I a master gardener. But being a farmer's daughter, I have learned a thing or two over the years about gardening. Today, however, we're going to take a break from gardening, and I'm going to share with you about a trip that I took to Kansas to visit family and friends back in my hometown and surrounding areas with my sons, Cameron and Owen. We started our journey off by first heading to Kansas from Boston Airport. When we landed in Wichita, Kansas, we had a short delay because the airplane had a malfunction with its door. It couldn't actually open and let our luggage out. So we were supposed to be meeting my aunt and cousin who were visiting Kansas from Pennsylvania at the exact same time, but we worked things out. We were mildly amused at the fact that we had to go to Kansas just to have dinner with family from Pennsylvania. But after we had dinner and we set on our journey for a 2-hour drive north of Wichita to a little town called Lincoln to stay with family. Lincoln is a very small community of maybe, I believe it's around 1,100 people is the population right now. So after we left Wichita, we headed north to Lincoln. As we were driving north, we had an unimaginable 4th of July experience. It was July 3rd that we were traveling, so we thought that we were going to miss any of our 4th of July festivities due to the travel. What we didn't expect is the treat that the fireworks and the flat, open, beautiful Kansas skyline was going to present to us. So as we were driving north, I would probably say we were half an hour into our drive by the time the sun started to come down, and the skyline literally began to light up with fireworks after fireworks. Now in Kansas, it is legal to purchase fireworks and shoot off your own displays, especially if it's 4th of July weekend. They do not have any restrictions. So imagine every small community, every large community, and every Tom, Dick, Joe, and Harry who could purchase fireworks and wanted to put on their own display were shooting off fireworks in the Kansas skyline that night. So when I say that we saw fireworks from all the way to this side, across the sky, and above, there was no ability to take a picture or a video of this, and they wouldn't have done it justice. But I have to say, it was one of the most amazing things I've ever experienced in my life, and it gave me a different sense of pride and belonging as an American, being in America's heartland on 4th of July. We finally reached Lincoln, and my cousin and her husband Carrie were there with the most gracious hospitality. Family is the best. So we settled in for the night, and the next morning we got up bright and early and we headed to Hutchinson, Kansas. We were going to go to the Salt Mine Museum in Hutchinson. It's called Stratica. If you ever go to southern Kansas, you have to go to Stratica Salt Mine Museum. It is an absolute must. When we arrived at Stratica, we first entered the museum and we were given our hard hats that had the lights, just like the miners. We still have to wear these for safety. That's what allowed OSHA, one of the guidelines for them to open up the Salt Mine Museum. However, they have an unprecedented safety record, which is also why they are allowed to have a museum in some of their unmined, abandoned mines and have turned it into this museum. So as we put on our caps, our hard hats with our lights, and we entered the loading area, and we went into this large room, that had this large elevator. They actually called it the hoist. And a hoist is the actual mine elevator that the miners still will use today to go up and down into the mine. Now mind you, we went 650 feet below the surface, through the aquifer, down to where the salt mine and the caverns are. After we traveled, I believe it was 3 minutes ride down to the mine. If you are afraid of complete darkness, they will turn on a light for you, but it was darker than dark on this mine ride a little bit. So when we first went down the mine, we went into this large room, and that kind of just told you the history and the geology. We had so much fun reading it. We're We're big geology nerds in my family, so this was completely up our alley. So as we were exploring the mine, we came across things like deposits that they had found of miners' trash. And the reason why they found this fascinating, because if you think of it from an archaeological aspect, one man's trash is another man's treasure, is in learning about the miners and what did they do. And on the tour, they told us what goes in the mine stays in the mine. So at first they told us that to kind of like be that thing like, oh no, we've gone down in the mine, so now we can't leave because what goes in the mine stays in the mine. But they actually were just talking about a lot of things of like trash and machinery. So if they go through the trouble of loading up a large piece of machinery or a lot of equipment or a lot of supplies to go down into the mine, it takes a lot of manpower and a lot of energy for them to do that. So they don't bring it up. So while we were down there, we saw like gutted cars that they like tore them down to the very bare necessities of machinery of what they would need to use. The reason why they would take everything down to the bare necessities is that's weight that you're traveling down the hoist. Because remember that hoist that we took to go down into the mine? They have to use that same hoist to move everything else in and out of the mine, whether they're taking machinery apart into movable pieces and putting it back together. So in the salt mine, we had so much fun looking at all the different artifacts they had. They even had some of the old wooden carts that we could climb in and pose. So of course we did the fun touristry thing, and you'll see here me posing in the old wooden cart and my two sons also posing in the old wooden cart, having a lot of fun. Then we went to an area and they told us how they would manually drill back in the 1913 and forward, and then now today it's all diesel hydraulic based drilling holes. A team will come in and drill all the holes in the walls. So the drill team comes in and they drill all the holes in the walls, and then they load it with explosives. And then they move on and they keep drilling and load it with explosives. So then at night, then the explosives team comes in, which is it's a smaller team, and they will actually ignite everything. And imagine just the walls just boom, crumbling to the ground. And then the next morning, the next team comes in and they clean it up and they move everything along. So we got to see one of these holes that had been drilled. And by seeing this hole that they drilled, it really was beautiful and fascinating to see the different layers of the bedrock and salt mixed in together. So as I said earlier, the Stratica is more than just a museum. It's also a storage vault. So we saw things down there from different Hollywood memorabilia, whether it's posters or even film reels, scripts. There's no way of knowing actually everything that's down there. But they have on display some of their paraphernalia that they're proud of and that the public might like to see. Things like the Men in Black photo, Wizard of Oz. There is even a very old computer down there that was like the size of a full room. I don't know if it was the first computer, but it was one of the first computers. There was some stuff from the movie Twister. There were boxes and boxes of what I can only imagine were scripts or notations. We had a lot of fun because we noticed on some of them were from the episode of Friends, which is a family favorite in my household. There was Superman costume that he wore, and then reels and reels of old Hollywood movies. I do believe I read somewhere that even the original copy of Gone with the Wind might actually be stored down into the vaults of Stratica. So after we toured everything that Hollywood, and we were reading about how even the U.S. government may store things down there, because it's always beautiful, 68 degrees and no humidity. So if you're looking for a place to get away from the Kansas heat, Stratica also was another great place to go. So one of the things that they offer while you're there is you could take what's called the dark ride, which was a little train ride. And the train ride, they laid the tracks of the original tracks that they used back in 1913 for the wooden carts and repurposed them for this little train ride for the tourists to take on. So then after we left the train shuttle, we got on the train shuttle and we saw amazing things, like this video here of us leaving the station. After we took this, while we were also on the ride, the caverns and twisted, and they had the lights out, so they really only highlighted the areas of interest that they wanted us to see. So we got to see it in its beauty. I believe in one of these videos you'll see where there was actually a fall that overnight one of the ceilings had sagged and sagged and sagged, and it actually collapsed onto the floor. This happened, of course, before the museum opened, so they actually now have a whole team that scours and travels through all of the caverns to make sure that none of these sags are happening, so they'll never have a risk of a ceiling falling while the tourists are down there. So don't worry about that. But we saw the old miners' compost toilet. We saw piles of trash that they had collected from miners from back in the 40s and the 50s. But they got a glimpse of the miners' lives and what was going on in the world at that time as they were going down into the mines. We saw this absolutely beautiful little segment that was a pure vein of salt. So I have a little segment here of similar to that of what a pure vein of salt would look like. So as we traveled on the trains and on the shuttle and in and out of all of the exhibits, this was the second time we had been to the Salt Mine Museum. We went maybe about a decade ago, and I know that the next time we go to Kansas we will be going back because there's something new to see. It's so fascinating just to take it all in and absorb it. After we left the Salt Mine Museum, since we were in Hutchinson, Kansas, my aunt, who I had met for dinner the night before, who was visiting from Pennsylvania, she was now in Hutchinson staying with my other aunt, her sister, my mother's sisters, and my cousin Jared. My cousin Jared just graduated from high school. So this shows you the dynamic of my very large family. On my father's side, I have a cousin who is a grandmother. And then on my mother's side, I have a cousin who just graduated from high school and who is younger than my own children. So, but anyway, we went and we celebrated, and I have not seen a lot of these people since 2013. So it was just so exciting to get together and to see everybody and just enjoy all of our silliness. Almost to the point that my children realized that maybe I'm not the silliest person in the family after all. But we had such a great time getting to visit with my Aunt Lisa and my cousin Melissa and my Aunt Wilda and my cousin Linda, and so many, many more. So I'm not going to share all of my family photos with you, but I just wanted to show you some highlights. So the next day, after we had headed back to Lincoln and got, again, another well-deserved good night's sleep, we headed back to Ellsworth. And while we were in Ellsworth, the first thing we did is we stopped for lunch, and we met with one of my oldest, dearest friends. We've been friends easily since first or second grade. Her house was like my second household growing up, and her parents were like a second set of parents to me. So it was just fantastic being able to see Mom and Dad Kirby and hang out with them. We are at Mushroom Rock. It's a state park here just south of Kannapolis, Kansas. This has been a state landmark that I often took for granted as a child, but now today I get to show it to my own children and enjoy its glory and its beauty. And then we walked around the state park. I'm not sure how many acres the park makes up, but it's minimum of 4 to 5 acres. It may be even more than that. And no two are alike. It is, again, a family spot. I took it for granted when I was a child, but had so much fun touring there with my children. So as we were touring the park, again, Kansas is a large place, but when you're there, it feels very small because these small communities, people are there for each other and checking in on each other. And while we were there, we saw this gentleman who had set up his painting table and was painting Mushroom Rock as we were touring around. And then as we were heading over to the other side of the park, we saw him like packing up. So we just, casually had said to him, "You heading home?" And he's like, "Oh yeah, this is getting too hot for me," because the day that we toured Mushroom Rock, it was at least 97 degrees outside in the hot Kansas sun with very little breeze. So the sun was very counterintuitive to what he wanted to do. So he was packing up. So we walked up the hill, and then we're coming back down the hill, and we see now he's unpacking his car. So I asked him again. I said, "Oh, you decided to stay?" So he's telling me, "Yeah, I was like looking around and I found another shady spot. So now I'm going to stay." So while talking to this gentleman, he was just such a fun, fascinating, interesting fella. So I asked him if I could do an interview. So he agreed to a short interview on while he was there. So this is what he had to say.
And I can get as close as you want. I've been fully vaccinated.
That's fine. I'm fully vaccinated as well.
I'm not afraid of germs or women.
So just give me a...
Well, the germs I'm okay with.
I was going to say,
at
least you can distinguish the two.
Okay.
Thank you. Tip your server.
There you are.
So we're still at Mushroom State Park. As we were walking around, we ran into a local, I'm going to call him an artist.
Okay.
But he told me he's not really an artist. He's just dabbles. But as we all know, artist is in the eye of the beholder. So this gentleman here, his name is Eric. Eric, can you tell us a little bit about where you're from?
I'm from Wichita, Kansas. Born and raised, lived, worked in the Wichita area all my life. So, and I'm just on vacation this week, and it's a painting vacation. So.
Fantastic. So what brought you 2 hours north to Kannapolis to paint Mushroom Rock?
Well, I've heard Mushroom Rock several times. I've got a friend of mine that brings his kids on camping trips and day trips, and this is one of the places they've gone because he involves, all of the kids, and anything to do with kids, I'm in love with, So he told me about Mushroom State Park, and it looked like something that I would like to paint. So I decided to put it on my agenda, and it was the first trip here on this vacation.
That sounds wonderful. So it is a beautiful park. I took it for granted as a child. So thank you so much for sharing your small story with us.
No problem.
And we're going to let Eric go because he was getting ready to pack up to go home because the sun invaded his space. Like I said, it was a brisk 97 degrees out here.
Somebody pointed me to a shady spot to where I can get a couple more paintings.
After he packed up.
I'm already packed up, so I'm going to unpack and paint.
So we're going to let him get to his shade and enjoy the rest of the sunlight. Thank you so much. So after Mushrooms Rock State Park, Tony, Cameron, and Owen and I, we ventured a little bit further north of Kannapolis into Clear Creek Township, I think is what it's called, to meet up with Karl, Tony's significant other. And Karl works at the salt mine in Kannapolis, and he also farms, grows wheat, other crops for feed, as well as a couple of herds of cattle. So as we were heading from Mushroom Rock to go to where Karl's farm was, we just passed the most amazing landscapes and got to see Kansas wheat fields in all of their glory, and the winding dirt roads and the everlasting horizon. So when we finally got to Karl's farm, he wasn't there yet. So now not only we were in search of the cattle herd, now we were in the search for Karl. But while we were there, we did see one single calf who had injured his leg. So Karl had separated him from the herd so he can heal. So we went searching around the corral to try to find the calf. We did find him momentarily, and he at all was not impressed with being on an episode of Farmer's Daughter. and he quickly ditched us and left and did his own thing. So then we left the farm, so we went searching for Karl. We finally found him, and we entered the pasture. And we drove down the pasture into the watering hole, and that was where we found the herd. Now you can tell that Karl spends a lot of time in the pasture taking care of his cattle and feeding them and meeting their needs, because they were not at all spooked or afraid to have him there. It was really a beautiful, amazing thing to be able to see him just walk in between his herd, and they thought of him as, not that I want to say another cow, because Karl certainly is not a cow, but he was not a threat. They found him to be a completely peaceful element. They knew that he was there as their care provider. And while I was there, I was able to take this short video. Here's our handsome fella who takes care of these ladies. Helps repopulate the herd. He's a beauty. So I'm at a friend's farm right now. One of my best friends from, kindergarten or whatever, brought us out. We're out here visiting the red herd. Welcome, ladies. Most of them are a red Angus. Some of them might be a Hereford Shorthorn mix. If you want to know more about those, you're going to have to Google that yourself, folks. But aren't they beautiful? And over here, we have the watering hole next to the iconic windmill, which does not look operational anymore. But in Kansas, there is not a lot of waterways, so farmers had to dig wells to have water pumped up to actually feed their herds as well as water themselves. Let's take one more look at these beautiful girls. So I want to thank all of my family, and I want to thank Tony and Karl and Mom and Dad Kirby for all of the fun that we had in exploring these first 2 days of our Kansas trip. So we will be back with part 2 of Farmer's Daughter, No Place Like Homecoming, and we will visit a Wagyu beef farm, which also is a cut flower farm. We'll explore an area called Ferris Caves, and we might even peek in on a wheat harvest. So join us as we explore The Farmer's Daughter, No Place Like Homecoming, Part 2. Hope to see you then.